right on a wide array of issues, which he is. The implications of his beliefs are that God is in charge of the universe, that his law is relevant, and that the Ten Commandments is a summary of that law system. There's a good story in Politico that says the following: Moore, an Alabama native and Vietnam veteran, has been motivated for his whole career by primarily one belief that his evangelical interpretation of Christianity should govern society. Well, that's not exactly the way he sees it, but he eloquently and effortlessly mixes Bible verses and quotes from the Founding Fathers at campaign stops and other appearances. God and the Bible alone are the moral foundation for law and government in America, he often says. That's his main point. That's his main point. The Bible, the revelation of God, and God are the moral foundation for law and government, period. And of course, he says it's in America because he says, well, that these laws are relevant here. Moore, who met his wife 33 years ago while reciting poetry during a Bible study, summed up these views in a poem he wrote in 2007, which begins, "America the beautiful, or so you used to be, land of the pilgrim's pride, I'm glad they're not here to see. Babies piled in dumpsters, abortion on demand. Oh, sweet land of liberty, your house is on the sand." That is quoting a Politico story that talks about the resurrection of Roy Moore, twice thrown out off the bench of the Alabama Supreme Court, and having lost twice elections for governor of that state. Now he's running for the Yankee Senate in Washington with a strong lead. That's one thing you have to appreciate about Roy Moore is he is uncompromising. He's a former military man, graduate of West Point. He was in the military police in the war, and has always stood his ground and insists that there cannot be an internal or private system of law. That law is, as the Christian scriptures attest, law is something that is from God. There's an external source of it. It is outside of any one person. It is outside of consensus, outside of arrangement, outside of Congresses and parliaments, outside of any particular executive office or judicial courtroom. And so that's what that law judges all the actors. And the more important you are as an actor, the more is expected of you, right? From those to whom much is given, much is expected. If you're just a commoner like me and a poor person, less is expected of you than of the judge or the commissioner or the mayor. We have Mayor Andy Burke. So God has a standard for everybody, and he wants there to be compassion. He wants there to be justice. He wants there to be honor, and he also, God places a premium on the right authority doing the right thing, not the wrong authority doing the right thing, right? And that there you have a question about federalism and how federalism, which follows the Presbyterian model, is in many ways the most godly, has the most prospect for a godly government than other forms of government. But I would argue, as I've argued in the past, that monarchy, if you have a king submitted to God's law, monarchy is maybe even better than life in a republic, because the monarch with his heirs, right, who will ascend to the throne, have an interest in maintaining the affinity of the people and not to ruin the family, right? Because the monarchical family rides on the prosperity of the nation. And so if there is a deplorable raping by the king and his officers of the people, then what is there for the son to inherit, right? So if you have a monarchical system and the heirs are the future governors and kings, well, you have an interest in maintaining peace in the kingdom and seeking its prosperity. You don't have that perspective now, where presidents are limited to 8 years. There's no need for Trump or Obama to look past the immediate political necessities, right? And so that's what they do. They have a very short-term perspective. And but those points aside, the more argument is that God has to govern, and that it's important for people to acknowledge that law of God summarized in the Ten Commandments. Of course, the Ten Commandments are just the summary. The body of these what's called the case law is in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books that Andy Burke reads faithfully, no doubt. and which Christians neglect. Right? Christians neglect the first 5 books. They think somehow that all the laws about equity, about punishment for the criminal, about justice for kidnappers, people who uh, offend their parents, people who are homosexuals, all the laws in the Old Testament that have victims and that have perpetrators, that those laws really don't matter much today. Somehow we think that the prison system, for example, that we have that has more than 20,000 slaves in Tennessee, state slaves in Tennessee, that's okay. It's in the Constitution, after all, right? So therefore, we don't have to think anything about it. In fact, it's in the Bill of Rights that you cannot be enslaved except for a crime of which you have been duly convicted. We have state slavery today. And does anybody think about that? Does any Christian think about that? When's the last time you heard your minister, if you're a practicing Christian, last time you heard the minister preach about prisons? Prisons are either godly by design or they're ungodly. And I would say that as I read into this question, that they are ungodly because they make the state the victim and they interfere with the godly requirement for the rights of the victim, for the victim being restored, allowing room for grace. Right? The state gives its grace as well, but it will not execute capital offenders who deserve death. It keeps them on the state dole for life, and it shows, of course, mercy by inclemency, as it will through the parole board. But the state does not care about the victim. You have token showings of care for the victim. There's a law that says the victim has to be notified when a prisoner is released, and he has to be notified of parole hearings and so on. But these are just tokens. They're not real. They're not part of restitution. And restitution is what Christianity demands. It demands peace, right? Peace between the offender and the offended. That's what's in view in Christianity. And if you have a state system that prevents that thwarts it, and doesn't provide capital sentences as it should, and doesn't allow for restitution and restoration as it should, then you've got a system that's plain evil. Now, if it's unchristian, that means it's anti-Christian. Okay, let's just say it plain out. It's an anti-Christian system that does not allow for the victim to obtain satisfaction from the perpetrator. And of course, if you have that, if there's that relationship, if it does, as it did in the old Hebrew Republic, if you do have that relationship, you have the prospect of personal forgiveness, and the debtor is told, I forgive you. You don't have to pay me the rest of the debt. You've worked for 5 years for me, paying off the theft that you committed against me. But God is prospering my business, and I forgive you. You are free to go. I release you. You are not bound to serve me anymore. You're not bound to make me payments anymore. I forgive you. You're free to go. That is something that is restorative, and that is peace. That is peace in the realm where the victim is responsible for collecting and for having his collection enforced by the judge, and then has later, as that relationship develops with the offender making good, now the victim can say, you are released, I forgive you. That we can't have that now. It's totally impersonal, it's totally bureaucratic, and even capital punishment is not personal as the scriptures require. And that's what's funny about what I hear in Christendom. We have a lot said about God's interest in the individual, and Christianity is all about the individual. It's all about the personal walk with God, your personal salvation, and your personal holiness. That's all we ever hear preached on. Never do we hear sermons about the larger system of society, which either hinders or helps that process, that remediation, if you will, between the victim and the offender. There's a good story that I want to mention to you about London, Great Britain. Uber is been outlawed in London. Now we have Uber in Chattanooga, and I'm not remembering now exactly where the Uber ordinance stands, but we have Uber for now, and it's free and in the clear. Uber was banned by the Transport for London Authority. This is a group that runs the Tube and the franchise's bus service. It has revoked Uber's license to operate, and it's done so according to Ian Murray, writing at Foundation for Economic Education. That's fee.org, fee.org. .org some odd arguments as to why Uber has to be shut down. And he says these grounds are puzzling. Uber has a team dedicated for working with the police regarding incidents with cars that use the Uber app, something that London's black cabs lack. These are the name of London cabs, the black cabs. Uber's drivers go through exactly the same background checks and approval processes that black cab drivers do, and Uber denies that the gray ball feature has ever been used in London. Moreover, accusations of violence, especially sexual violence by Uber app drivers, are overblown, as Reuters reports of the 154 allegations of rape or sexual assault made to police in London between February 2015 and February 2016, in which the suspect was a taxi driver. 32 concerned Uber. In other words, only 32, according to the capital's police force. And if you have Uber banned, as now has happened in London, you have the prospect of women standing alone on curbs at night, unable to get transport, unable to get a transportation from point A to point B. Now, of course, transportation is, of course, using cars and trucks in commerce for hire, and that is, of course, a business subject to regulation by the authorities, as here in Tennessee. In Tennessee, we have Title 55 that regulates transportation, and also regulates people like you who have a driver's license under authority of transportation, though you are not involved in transportation at all as a common carrier. TfL should remember that the unlicensed minicab industry, the story points out, has a worse record. Again, that's another industry which we can say thankfully is unlicensed, but there the story says are more complaints about abuses, 1,125 cases of sexual assault by unlicensed minicab drivers a year. That was before Uber started up in 2010, I believe. Well, I don't think that's quite correct, but anyway, the story says that women are going to be more vulnerable now that they can't catch an Uber driver. And also, I want to mention another story that touches on the question of licensure and claims by the state upon whole areas. If you have a prison system, if you have a judicial industrial complex, as we do here in Howland County, you have innovative people such as Scott Canavos, who is an attorney in Cleveland, and also Andy Baggenstoss of Grundy County. The Baggenstasses are Swiss descendants, of which I'm also a Swiss descendant. They have the bakery, the very famous bakery in Grundy County, the Swiss bakery. And the family's done many things, and now it has developed one of the largest bail bonding companies in the state, according to Dave Flessner, writing in the Chattanooga Times-Free Press. The story is interesting because it seems to offer an advantage for the state's agents, that would be courts in the counties. And the savings would be that you don't have to have someone in your jail, which costs $60 a day, but for $10 a day, you can have our service. Our service with this, the company is Tennessee Recovery and Monitoring. The president is Andy Baggenstoss. He has a vice president, Scott Cranmore, and a very nice photograph that they give at the offices of Waterhouse Public Relations on Friday, July 28th. Now, the story is about the monitoring system, the ankle bracelet system, which is digital. So the argument is save money and come with us. We're going to earn $10 a day that the poor inmate, the man who would be in prison, he's free, but now he's having to pay $10 a day. If he can't prove indigency, he has to pay the $10 a day and also be subject to invasive searches, and he has to sign away his constitutionally guaranteed rights to be free from unwarranted searches and seizures. That's what if you take part in that program, you waive your constitutional rights. You need to know that. The story quotes attorney Scott Cavanaugh as saying, "It was at that point I had this epiphany and saw the wisdom of these devices. This can kind of be like a house arrest, while those charged with a crime wait to go to trial, or those convicted of nonviolent crimes can be supervised and can keep working and seeing their family. I've had nothing but excellent experiences ever since I started working with Baggenstoss and Cranmore, the partner." And the problem addressed is we have overcrowded jails. We have people who are on the public dole. Of course, you're ruined. You're waiting for trial. Okay, you can't make bail, and you're waiting for trial. And the option is, well, have this device on your ankle. We get the court to agree, get the judge to agree. You wear this device. $10 a day to us. We're saving the government money. Last year alone, Dave Flessner reports Bagenstos estimates the monitors saved more than $7.3 million in jail costs in Tennessee by monitoring people 139,496 days. The program costs participating counties only $47,000 since the ankle bracelets are either paid for by the user or from a state indigent fund that pays $10 a day. So the user has to pay, or the state indigent fund pays. They charge $10 a day under the state's fund for those who can't afford to pay, is still a fraction of the cost of incarceration. So we have a cost savings. We, the entrepreneurs, we have a cost savings. We're going to make a good buck, and we're going to save you, the industrial judicial complex. We're going to save you money, and have our profits. So there are always efficiencies where the private entrepreneur has a great idea and a great technology, and he's coming in, he's going to make a profit on the poor person who's barely making it, but he can get out. He can get out with a judge's agreement if he can pay the money, right? He's got a job. If he hasn't lost it, he's got a job waiting for him when he gets out. After 4 or 5 weeks in jail, the arrangements are made, and he's coming back to his family, too poor to pay, but he's agreed somehow just to try it. Maybe he can make it. He can pay that $10 a day. If we can do treatment and recovery through private enterprise, that's what I'm all about. Mr. Bagenstos says, I wanted to carry on the legacy of my father, and I wanted to help other people, which we certainly do. But we also want to be different. My father did lots of different things, but I wanted to be great at one thing. That's quoting an entrepreneur, Andy Bagenstos, and who the story is about his for-profit monitoring device. Well, I'd say on one hand, bravo, but the larger question remains of why there's so many people in jail to begin with. Why do we have so many people, many of whom are there for paper crimes, many of whom are there under statutes such as disorderly conduct, which is unconstitutionally vague, but which will not be challenged probably ever, because it takes too much time to challenge a vague statute where two of the provisions of that law are simply incomprehensible. They're incomprehensible and vague enough to be charged under, right? It's a statute vague enough to be charged under the vague parts of that law. The parts that are clear, they're less used than the vague parts that are open to interpretation. We have people who are poor who just can't get out, and I'm just asking why so much policing? Why? What do we have to do to scale back the operation of this system where real crimes can be tried, where people who are accused can get indicted, can be rapidly tried and sentenced? Let that be the direction in which we work. And does Christianity have anything to say about it? Well, it does, and I'm on a quest to find a minister in Chattanooga who's preached a sermon on prisons. Now, if you know a minister who's preached a sermon on prisons, please email me. I would like to hear about what that sermon said and see if there's anything favorable to Christianity and favorable to liberty and to local families who already have enough stress. We know families are under great stress. The buying power of the dollar is declining thanks to the Federal Reserve System, thanks to the banking sector. And wages have been in decline for well more than a decade. And the elites at the top 0.5% of the economy are making astronomical increases in their profits according to financial charts. They're making their killing, and they have it because of our system. It's designed to be broken. It's designed, I think, to a zero end. There's not a real end out of what we're facing. There is a disaster ahead, and that's when there'll be a major breakage in the financial sector, in the credit part of the economy. Well, this is David Tulis, and I say bravo for free enterprise that comes up with solutions. But serving the state, free enterprise serving the state, well, that's the $1 billion fighter serving the state. That's the surveillance apparatus that serves the state. You know, I did a search recently, working on my unmarked car story for police lights, and I'm still seeing that one search to see how easy it is to buy police lights, to put into on your dashboard. If you are the molester going to harass women on the side of the road at night, have your police lights in your unmarked car. I'm still seeing advertisements online for that from that one search. And yes, there are companies that will serve you on surveillance gear, on police gear, on snooping gear. And the free market is always there to help the state. The state is a gigantic customer. It is a customer of so many fine and wonderful services. And free enterprise is there to help, just there to help there to reduce your costs, there to make your databases more efficiently searchable, there to aggregate images stolen from Facebook and put into a database of all faces where every face is digitized into a code, right? And we can use that code to we search that code online. We can find people here and there. We can find anybody. Free enterprise there to make the state's effort to serve you more efficient. Police lights, yeah, you can buy police lights, and not too expensive, but you can. If since we have unmarked cars patrolling in Chattanooga, you can have your own police car headlights in your car. And if you have a victim, you can chase that victim down, flash your lights at her, and if she's not very careful, she'll pull over on that dark lane there along the creek, and off Lightfoot Mill Road, right? She'll pull over on Lightfoot Mill Road before you get to the bridge, and you can have your way with her, because you are, after all, pretending to be an officer. And we know that police officers in Chattanooga run traffic in unmarked cars. That's a story that is you might say it's developing, or you could say it's just since I haven't been able to get an interview with the city attorney about the policy, it's just waiting sort of in the wings there as I get to it. So I do thank you for giving me, David Tulis, a moment of your time here. We are at 92.7 FM, live on Facebook. Do like us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Like my show. It's at Nooga Radio on Facebook, the Nooga Radio page, live also on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio. We are hot. We are news. We are talk. We are radio. David Tulis. My show is brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the show for the man who matters. And in the past week, I've hit very hard the topic of Miranda warnings, and have gotten some good advice this morning from attorney Jerry Summers. And he suggests that I take a good read at an important case that made some modifications of Miranda. I think he described it as Berkheimer versus McCarthy, 1984. Worth looking at. David Tulis, I do thank you for joining me. Read and subscribe. Subscribe to Nooganomics.com. That's Nooganomics.com. Not a popular website. Why? Because it's for the man who matters, and we know that there are not many of those. But you are a prospect. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4.